Chosen set Captain Lauren Whittaker, cousin Jake Whittaker, uncle Captain Donovan Whittaker, nephew Caleb. Jake lifted his bottle high, that smug grin spreading wide, as if the whole evening belonged to him. To Lauren, the queen of paperwork in the skies. The chuckles exploded around the picnic table, every head swiveling my way with that mix of affection and mockery. They had no clue about the acrid bite of burning fuel that clings to your skin long after touchdown. They couldn't imagine the raw desperation in voices crackling over the headset as rotors failed and the bird spiraled. And they absolutely didn't know the ghost who answered to Phantom Zero. I forced a smile because keeping my mouth shut had always felt like armor. Yet as their laughter bounced off the string lights and drifted into the warm Florida dusk, I made a vow right there among the citronella candles. Next time they aimed their jokes at me, I'd speak. My name is Lauren Whittaker, and that barbecue marked the final season. I'd let anyone confuse my restraint with surrender. The guffaws rolled across the lawn like a lazy tide, the sort that usually wrapped you in belonging. Tonight each one landed like a splinter under the nail. Jake was deep into another tale, something about authentic grit and the unbreakable spine of real soldiers. The words hung heavy, almost visible in the humid air. Nobody glanced over, not even out of courtesy. They didn't need to, they'd already scripted my role. I sat with my fingers curled around a sweating soda can, the aluminum groaning softly under pressure. Nobody registered. Maybe I'd faded into the background on purpose. Maybe that was simpler for everyone. Whittaker gatherings ran on volume and swagger. There wasn't much oxygen left for the soft-spoken. Silence had been my shield, but shields get heavy. When Jake hoisted his drink toward his father, Captain Donovan Whittaker, the old man's chest swelled with unmistakable delight. I watched them, mirror images of certainty and decibel level, and wondered if our bloodline had ever carved out space for someone who proved herself in altitude instead of applause. The briny scent found me before my feet registered the shift from grass to sand. The party noise receded, swallowed by the rhythmic hush of waves. I stood ankle deep in moonlit surf and whispered a promise to the dark water. One day the hush that kept me unseen would shatter, not in rage, but in revelation. I grew up where the Gulf breeze carried 3 unbreakable rules. Keep your voice low, your hands busy, and your questions to yourself. I'd smashed everyone before my 25th birthday. In our little stretch of coast, Uncle Donovan's name stood for valor, hardware, and the kind of yarns swapped over coolers at dusk. He was the cornerstone myth. Jake, his only son, was the obvious successor. Me, the niece who wrangled fighter jets, I was the courteous footnote. Oh yeah, and Lauren flies? Tacked onto the end of sentences. They adored their heroes, but never thought to look across the table at one. I allowed it. Truth stamp tape SCR'd is a live wire. One careless word and everything burns. Still, some evenings the past seeped in like groundwater. Crimson cockpit lights strobing. Static laced pleas. We're taking fire. Phantom Zero, do you copy? My own voice, calm as glass copy. Package inbound, hold tight. Weeks later, back on deck. My heo pulled me aside, voice barely above the hum of fluorescent tubes. Captain Whittaker's squad wouldn't be here without you. He's aware. My stomach dropped. So the legend himself had ridden shotgun under my wings, knew exactly who'd yanked him from the jaws of a hot LZ, and chose to zip it. For Jake's ego, for the family brand, for whatever story he told himself in the mirror. The price tag was attached to my name. That night Dad and I lingered on the dock as the sky bruised purple. He spoke to the horizon more than to me. Some folks chase standing ovations. Others chase contrails. It was the closest he ever came to saying he saw me. But the quiet that once felt like refuge now scraped like barnacles. If Donovan wanted a cone of silence, I'd flood it with daylight. The moon hung fat and low when I padded down the path. Sand cool between my toes. I wasn't shocked to find Donovan already there, boots off, trousers rolled, staring at the place where water dissolved into ink. He didn't turn. "Appreciate you, Lauren." Phantom Zero, the call sign landed like a flare, brief, blinding. I answered soft. "Just doing the job, sir." "You could have said something." "Once." He exhaled through his nose. "Didn't want Jake measuring himself against a ghost and coming up short. So you measured me instead and found me wanting." He had no comeback, just a slow nod at the tide. "Fair. My team still carries the debt, but we don't do gratitude in public. We carry it." I studied the hard lines of his profile softened by silver light. He wasn't malicious. He was welded to a code where acknowledgement equaled weakness and hierarchy was oxygen. That code was suffocating the rest of us. I kept my volume low. "Keep your quiet if it keeps you warm. But the next time your son uses me as a punchline, I won't swallow it." Donovan finally met my eyes. Something gentle cracking through the granite. "You've more than earned the floor, Captain." The surf crept higher, fizzing around our calves. In that pale wash of moonlight, every unspoken thing floated to the surface. Love tangled with vanity, duty braided with dread. I turned back toward the glow of the house, laughter now just a faint percussion, and understood this was the final summer my silence would shield anyone but me. 2 years later I came home, carrying a new center of gravity. The assurance I'd banked at 30,000 feet felt too large for the folding chairs and checkered tablecloths. Same charcoal smoke, same playlist of yacht rock, same voices calibrated to dominate. Jake held court beside the smoker, already mid-performance. He raised his bottle to the cluster of cousins and neighbors. "Welcome back, Captain Whittaker. Rumor has it the Navy's got you buried in PowerPoints." The laughter crackled like dry kindling. I smiled, the expression sharp enough to cut. "Depends how high you define buried, Jake." A sudden lull swallowed the crickets. Even the palm fronds seemed to freeze. Donovan glanced up from his lawn chair, pride and caution wrestling across his sun-creased face. I watched the old choreography rehearse itself. Everyone gushed over Jake's boot, campsite hustle, his Instagram discipline challenges, his carefully curated toughness. Nobody inquired about my last deployment. I was still the well-mannered cousin who waited her turn. Then a gravelly voice sliced through. Master Chief Barrett Knox, one of Donovan's old teammates, clapped the captain on the back hard enough to echo. "Remember that crazy aviator who yanked your bacon out of the fire off the horn?" "What was that call sign?" "Phantom Zero." The night went still as glass. Donovan's grin looked painted on. "Hell of a stick, that one." My heart stuttered against my ribs. He'd said it aloud, almost like penance. Nobody caught the tremor except me. Jake barreled on, oblivious. "At least that pilot's got stones. Some of us just push pixels." I set my glass down with a deliberate clink. "Some of us fly where the only reset button is a body bag." The sentence hung like gun smoke. Before anyone could reload, I was walking toward the shore. Donovan's stare branding the back of my neck. The storm wasn't meteorological. It was gathered around that picnic table, waiting for ignition. That same summer the sky put on its own show. Fireworks bloomed over the bay, while Jake flexed through a mock SEAL workout for an audience of lawn chairs and red cups. The spectacle grated against my sternum. Inside, Mom stirred peach tea, her smile thin as onion skin. Jake's really carving out a name for himself. "You flying those jets is lovely too, sweetheart, just so risky." I managed a nod that didn't quite reach my eyes. Outside, Jake spotted me. "Hey Lauren, maybe next year you graduate to actual PT with the big kids." The laughter detonated again. Even Donovan stayed mute. Then Caleb, Jake's 5-year-old, piped up from knee level. "Daddy, isn't Aunt Lauren a soldier too?" The chuckles choked off like someone yanked a plug. Jake forced a breezy laugh. Different branch of the tree, bud. I crouched so we were eye to eye. One day you'll figure out there's more than one kind of brave, little man. His solemn nod hit harder than any barb. Later I found Donovan alone in the kitchen, fluorescent light unforgiving on the trimmer in his hand. This isn't harmless fun, I said. He rubbed the label off his bottle. I don't want family dinners to feel like a firefight. Your silence already turned the table into a kill zone. It convinced Jake the sun rises because he flexes. Donovan's gaze drifted to some middle distance. Maybe the ceasefire needs to end. Outside, another rocket screeched upward, blossoming gold. In the window's reflection I looked taller, steadier, primed. 3 years on, I returned for Donovan's 60th. The Whittaker lawn had swollen into a full, blown festival. Old teammates in faded caps, neighbors who'd heard the legends, kids darting between coolers like minnows. Jake owned the center ring, retelling BBQ stories with cinematic flair. When he spotted me, he lifted his cup in salute. Commander Whittaker, gracing us with her presence, still pushing pencils at 30,000 feet. The laughter rippled outward. I set my iced tea down with care. Still pushing the envelope, Jake. Just not as close to the ground as your ego. The wave of sound collapsed. Donovan's jaw flexed, respect and warning flickered in equal measure. Jake tried to backpedal with a grin. Easy, cuz, all love. You love the echo, I said, soft enough that only the front row caught it. A retired chief, 3 sheets to the wind, leaned in. You in the service too, darlin'. Call sign. Jake smirked. Yeah, let's hear it, Paper Falcon. I inhaled the salt and smoke and answered clear. Phantom Zero. You could have heard a napkin flutter. Someone in the back whispered, no way. Donovan rose like the old days, voice cutting clean. Jacob, apologize. Now. Jake blinked. Dad, it's... Apologize to the officer who flew through hell so my team could breathe again. Jake's tan drained 2 shades. You're telling me she threaded the needle so we could come home to our kids. Donovan finished. And you made her the joke. Jake's whisper barely carried. I didn't know. The backyard held its breath. I broke it. Now you do. Donovan fished a brass challenge coin from his pocket, pressed it into my palm. Should have done this the day we rotated home. Fireworks stitched the sky, but the real light was the metal warming against my skin. Later I drove the coast road, windows down, salt air whipping my hair into knots. The coin glinted each time I passed a street lamp. Donovan's headlights appeared in my mirror. He pulled over on the shoulder where dunes met asphalt. He walked to the water's edge, no longer the captain, just a man with rolled sleeves and regret in his posture. You shouldn't have needed me to open my mouth. But I did. He handed me a redacted after-action report, my name beneath thick black bars. They buried the details, but never the call sign. I thought silence kept you safe. Turns out it only kept my pride intact. And Jake's delusions, I added. He produced another coin, edges polished by years of pockets. The team carried this for the day we could say thank you out loud. I closed my fingers around both discs. We're square, Captain. Just no more soundproofing the truth. He tipped his chin toward the breakers. No more. 3 more years, and the tarmac at Pensacola shimmered under a noon sun brutal enough to blur the heat mirages. Rows of dress whites and brass caught the glare. I'd been summoned for a joint service commendation, no longer classified, no longer a ghost story. Hangar doors yawned open, cameras poised, a marching band sweating through their tunes. I scanned the crowd and locked on Donovan in his faded service dress, ribbon sun bleached but posture perfect. He'd never attended anyone else's ceremony. My pulse skipped. When the applause died, he approached holding his old trident cap. You wear the cloth better than any of us ever managed. Don't oversell it, sir. Then he snapped a salute crisp enough to cut paper. Half the retired SEALs in the bleachers followed. I returned it, throat thick. No speeches required. The gesture said everything 10 years late. Afterward he slipped me a Polaroid. Young lieutenant beside a silhouetted pilot, face lost in overexposure. Never knew her name, he murmured. Mystery solved. That night my phone lit up. Saw the clip, you earned every second. Proud doesn't cover it. Jake, short, clumsy, perfect. I blinked at the screen until the words swam. The following summer the backyard felt different. No chest thumping, no volume wars. Just the sizzle of steaks, the whisper of palm fronds, kids shrieking through tag. Jake had pivoted. Now he ran a non-profit pairing vets with civilian mentors. His voice carried a new note, curiosity. When I stepped through the gate, conversation paused like a held breath. I wore summer blues, no fruit salad, just cloth and purpose. Jake stood. Everybody. Meet Commander Whittaker, the aviator who flew my father out of the furnace. The clap that followed felt like sunlight on skin. Donovan stayed seated, eyes shining. Mom leaned in. Finally they see you. I came for the potato salad, I said. Caleb, 7 now and all elbows, skidded to a stop in front of me. Dad says you flew through lightning to save Grandpa. I knelt. I just refused to leave anyone behind. Donovan's composure cracked, tears tracked the creases beside his nose. Jake's hand settled on my shoulder, unsteady. I was an idiot. Now you're not, I said, and the smile that followed felt like absolution. At twilight Donovan found me on the porch steps. He offered the original challenge coin, edges buttery from years of handling. This was always yours. I glanced at Caleb licking popsicle drips off his wrist, eyes saucer, wide at the glint. Let him keep it on the fridge. Let him ask questions. Donovan folded the boy's fingers around the metal. The sun dipped, painting everything bronze. Jake watched the light climb the oaks, then met my gaze. Thought I needed the spotlight. Turns out I just needed the dark to see by. Peace, I asked. Peace, he echoed. 12 years after that first stinging cookout, I rolled into Jacksonville on leave, windows down, pine and brine thick as syrup. The old house sagged comfortably, porch now a timeline in frames, Donovan in dress blues, Jake gripping a folded flag at a memorial, Caleb in a miniature flight suit, and there, tucked between, me in front of a Hornet, helmet under my arm, scrawl beneath Phantom Zero, keeper of the brave. Inside, Caleb, 18 and deliberate, polished the glass over the challenge coin. He turned, sunlight catching the angles that used to be baby fat. Aunt Lauren, were you ever afraid up there? Every second, I said. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to keep the throttle firewalled anyway. He smiled, equal parts wonder and recognition. Dad says bravery's in the Whittaker DNA. I shook my head. Bravery's in the choice. The screen door sighed. Donovan stepped out slower, cane tapping rhythm, but the set of his shoulders still broadcast command. You taught this family what service actually costs. I laughed, took a decade of potato salad and heartburn. He chuckled, the sound blending with cicadas. Overhead, T-34s carved perfect diamonds across the sky, afterburners glinting. The reflection danced across the coin in Caleb's hand, and for one heartbeat the whole porch blazed. I looked from the boy to the man who'd once been my anonymous passenger and whispered. The only audience that ever mattered already knew. The rest are just catching the wake. The jets faded into azure. Donovan eased into a rocker, eyes half-lidded. Caleb stood easy, coin catching the last shard of sun. Honor wasn't locked in marble or shouted from stages, it lived in the quiet click of understanding after the engines cooled. The sky stayed wide open, and for the first time in Whittaker history, nobody felt the need to fill it with noise. The years kept rolling in like tides, each one gentler than the last, but none of them soft. Caleb graduated high school with a quiet intensity that reminded me of myself at that age. eyes always scanning the horizon for something bigger than the small town that raised him. He'd chosen the Naval Academy, not because Jake pushed or Donovan bragged, but because one summer afternoon when he was 12, he'd sat on the dock with me while I cleaned salt crust off my flight boots and asked, "Aunt Lauren, what does it feel like when the catapult punches you into the sky?" I told him the truth. Like the world drops out from under you, and you realize you're the only thing keeping it from falling apart. He never forgot the answer. By the time he was 21, he wore the midshipman's stripes with the same unhurried confidence I'd seen in Donovan decades earlier, only without the need to prove anything to anyone. Jake had learned to watch his son with a kind of stunned gratitude, like he couldn't believe the boy had grown into someone who didn't need volume to be heard. Donovan, now pushing 75, spent most afternoons on the porch with a dog-eared copy of The Art of War and a glass of sweet tea, pretending he wasn't waiting for the mail to bring another letter from Annapolis. Mom had taken to framing every postcard Caleb sent home. Photos of the Severn River at dawn, the chapel spire cutting through fog, a candid shot of him laughing with his squad, and hanging them in a crooked line down the hallway like a paper trail of pride. I came home less often now, my own wings clipped to a desk at the Pentagon more than I cared to admit. The promotion to captain had come with a corner office and a staff of lieutenants who called me "Ma'am," with the kind of reverence that made me itch. I flew a desk more than a jet these days, but every time I walked past the wall of commendations in the corridor, I caught the glint of that first challenge coin, the one Donovan had pressed into my palm the night the truth finally detonated. It lived in a shadow box now, next to a faded photo of a younger me climbing out of a cockpit, hair plastered to my forehead with sweat and hydraulic fluid. The plaque beneath read simply Phantom 0, she flew so they could live. 1 October, the kind where the air smelled like burnt sugar and the Gulf was flat as glass. Caleb came home on Liberty with a duffel bag and a secret. He waited until the house was quiet. Jake and his wife tucked into the guest room, Donovan snoring in his recliner with the TV flickering blue across his face. Then slipped out to the dock where I sat with my feet in the water, watching the moon lay a silver road across the bay. "Aunt Lauren," he said, voice low, "I need to tell you something." I patted the space beside me. "Shoot." He sat, elbows on his knees, staring at the water like it might give him the words. "I'm putting in for aviation. Not surface warfare, not SEALs, I want to fly." The words hung between us, heavier than the humid air. I felt the old ache in my chest, the one that lived somewhere between pride and terror. "You know what you're asking for?" "I do." He turned to me, and for the first time I saw the man he was becoming, steady, deliberate, unafraid to look the truth in the eye. "I've read the redacted reports, the ones they let us see in leadership class. Phantom 0. Modishu, the pilot who flew a burning Hornet through a AAA gauntlet to pull a SEAL team off a rooftop. They still talk about it. They just don't know it was you." I laughed, soft and tired. "They don't need to. They do," he said fiercely. "I do. I want to earn it, not the story, the call sign, the choice." I studied him for a long moment. The boy who used to ask if I was scared now sat beside me asking permission to be terrified. "You'll have to be better than good, Caleb. You'll have to be necessary." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I know." We sat in silence until the cicadas started up again, their electric drone filling the space where words used to live. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the challenge coin. The original. The one Donovan had given him all those years ago. He turned it over in his fingers, the brass catching the moonlight. "Grandpa says, this belongs to the person who earns the sky, not the person who talks about it. I took the coin, felt its familiar weight. Your grandpa's a wise old bastard when he wants to be. Caleb grinned, the same crooked smile Jake used to flash before he learned humility. He also says you're the reason he stopped needing to be the loudest voice in the room. I handed the coin back. Keep it. You'll need something to remind you why you're doing this, when the instructors are screaming in your ear and the G-forces are trying to peel your face off. He closed his fist around it. Yes, ma'am. The next morning, Jake found us on the dock at dawn, coffee steaming in our hands. He took one look at Caleb's face, set, determined, a little pale, and knew. His own expression crumpled, not with anger but with something rawer. He'd spent years trying to outrun the shadow of his father's legend, only to watch his son step willingly into one of his own making. You sure? Jake asked, voice rough. Caleb nodded. I've never been more sure of anything. Jake looked at me, eyes glassy. You gonna teach him how to land on a carrier in a storm? I shrugged. If he's half as stubborn as his father, he'll figure it out. Jake laughed, the sound catching in his throat. Then he pulled Caleb into a hug, so tight the boy's feet left the dock. When he let go, he turned to me. I used to think bravery was about being the guy everyone talked about. Turns out it's about being the guy who makes sure everyone else gets to talk tomorrow. I didn't trust my voice, so I just nodded. That winter, Caleb shipped out to Pensacola for primary flight training. The first letter home was written in the shaky scrawl of someone who'd just pulled 7Gs for the first time and lived to tell about it. He described the instructor's voice in his headset. Calm, relentless, feet wet, feet dry, don't kill yourself, kid, and how the ocean looked like a postage stamp from 10,000 feet. At the bottom, in block letters, Pantium 0 mes are. Donovan read it aloud at the dinner table, his voice cracking on the last line. Mom cried into her mashed potatoes. Jake just stared at the paper like it was written in a language he was still learning to read. Spring brought the first solo flight. Caleb called from the Oak Club, half drunk on adrenaline and cheap beer. I did it, Aunt Lauren. I flew the pattern. I landed. I didn't die. You're not allowed to die, I told him. You still owe me a beer. He laughed, the sound bright and sharp across the miles. Copy that, ma'am. The years blurred after that. Caleb earned his wings of gold on a day, so clear the gulf sparkled like shattered glass. The ceremony was small, just family, a few instructors, the commandant who'd once screamed at him until his ears rang. Donovan stood ramrod straight in his dress blues, the medals on his chest catching the sun like tiny suns. Jake's hands shook as he pinned the wings to his son's chest. Mom sobbed openly. I stood off to the side, watching the boy who used to ask about fear become the man who'd learned to carry it like a co-pilot. After the pinning, Caleb found me by the hangar, the new wings glinting against his khaki. I got my call sign, he said, trying and failing to keep the grin off his face. Yeah. Revenant too. I felt the air leave my lungs in a rush. They don't just hand those out. They said I flew the check ride like I had a ghost riding shotgun. He paused, then softer, I told them I did. I swallowed hard. Your great uncle's gonna lose his mind. He already did. He's framing the orders. That night, back at the house, we gathered on the porch like we always had. The grill smoked. The kids, Jake's younger too, Caleb's cousins, chased fireflies across the lawn. Donovan raised a glass of sweet tea, his hand steady now. To the next generation, he said. May they fly higher than we ever dreamed and land softer than we ever managed. Caleb clinked his bottle against mine. To Phantom Zero, he said quietly. The one who taught us the sky doesn't care how loud you are. It only cares if you show up. I looked around the circle. Jake, humbled and whole, Donovan, old but unbroken Mom, eyes shining with a pride that didn't need words, Caleb, wings still warm from the sun. The challenge coin sat on the table between us, catching the porch light like a tiny star. Somewhere out over the gulf, a jet roared past, afterburners painting the night orange. We all looked up, the way people do when they hear thunder that isn't thunder. Caleb smiled, the expression equal parts fear and hunger. Feet wet, feet dry, he murmured. I raised my glass. Don't kill yourself, kid. He laughed, the sound carrying across the water and into the dark, where the sky waited, wide, indifferent, and absolutely ours.